I couldn't breathe in that small room at the bank. The walls were a sterile beige, the kind that's supposed to be calming, but instead feels like being trapped in a manila envelope. 3 officials stood around me like I was about to confess to something, and maybe I was. Confessing that I'd given up, that I'd accepted my fate as a woman with nothing left to lose. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a constant buzz that matched the static in my brain. I kept my hands folded in my lap because they wouldn't stop shaking, and I didn't want these strangers to see how close I was to falling apart completely. The youngest one, a woman with kind eyes and a name tag that said Jennifer, kept asking me to verify my address, my date of birth, my mother's maiden name. "Standard security questions," she said, smiling gently. But each answer felt like peeling back another layer of skin. Yes, I still live at that address. No, I don't know for how much longer. Yes, that's my mother's maiden name. She's been dead for 30 years. I answered in a voice that didn't sound like mine anymore, thin and hollow, like something had scraped out my insides and left only this papery shell. Then she said the number, $95,000. She said it twice because I didn't react the first time. I couldn't. My brain couldn't process that those words had anything to do with me. Numbers that big belonged to other people. People with retirement accounts and financial advisors and futures that stretched beyond the next property tax bill. Not to me. Not to a 72-year-old woman in a teal tracksuit she'd been wearing for 3 days straight. I looked down at my hands, at the tissue I'd been twisting into shreds, at the faint liver spots that had appeared in the last few years like small betrayals of time. I thought, this is a mistake. This has to be a mistake. But then the manager, an older man with silver hair and a tie clip, slid a folder across the table. His movements were careful, deliberate, like he was handling something precious. Inside was my godmother's name, and my name, and the word inheritance, printed in clean black type that made it real. Too real. I put my head down on that cold desk and sobbed so hard I thought I might break in half. Not from relief, from the unbearable weight of realizing I'd been loved and protected by people I'd never even met, even while I was drowning, especially while I was drowning. Jennifer pushed a box of tissues toward me and said nothing, just let me cry. The manager got me a cup of water in a small paper cone. I couldn't hold it steady enough to drink. But let me go back. Let me show you how I got to that room. Let me show you what happens when grief becomes a weapon in someone else's hands. 2 years ago, my son died of cancer in a hospice bed 20 minutes from my duplex in Brooklyn. He was 43 years old. I held his hand until it went cold, and then I kept holding it because I didn't know what else to do. His skin changed texture under my fingers, going from warm and pliant to something harder, cooler, unfamiliar. I kept waiting for him to squeeze back, the way he used to when he was little and afraid of thunderstorms. But his hand just lay there in mine, getting heavier as the minutes passed. His wife stood on the other side of the bed, crying into her phone, texting people, organizing, already moving forward while I was still trying to understand that my boy was gone. She called the funeral home while I was still holding him. She made a list of who to notify while I sat there, frozen, unable to let go. The hospice nurse finally had to gently pry my fingers loose. She said something about giving other family members time to say goodbye, but I barely heard her. The boy I'd raised in that duplex with the shared driveway and thin walls, in this mixed-income neighborhood near downtown where everyone knew everyone's business. That boy was gone, and I was 70 years old, and I didn't know how to be a mother with no child left to mother. The hospice room smelled like antiseptic and something sweeter underneath, something I couldn't name but that I'll never forget. There were cards on the windowsill from friends and cousins and neighbors, all saying the same useless things. Thinking of you. Prayers for healing. Stay strong. As if staying strong had ever cured cancer. As if thinking about someone could bring them back. His funeral was on a Tuesday. Summer heat pressed down on us at the cemetery, the kind of heat that makes everything slow down, where the air feels too thick and every breath is work. The grass was brown at the edges, dying from drought. The sky was that bright, merciless blue that has no business existing on a day like that. I wore the only black dress I owned. Too tight now, too formal. The zipper caught at my hip, the fabric pulled across my shoulders. I wanted my teal tracksuit, the one I used to wear on my morning walks before my knees gave out, before everything gave out. I wanted to be comfortable in my grief, but grief isn't comfortable. Grief is a room with no air. I stood at the graveside, sweating through that dress, feeling the dampness spreading across my back, under my arms, and I thought about how my son hated the heat, how he'd always cranked up the air conditioning too high when he visited until I'd wrap myself in a sweater in July, how he'd laugh at me and say, "Mom, it's 90 degrees outside." And I'd say, "Not in here, it isn't." We'd had that same conversation 100 times. I'd give anything to have it one more time. My daughter-in-law gave a beautiful eulogy. Everyone said so. People approached me afterward to tell me how moving it was, how eloquent, how she really captured his spirit. She talked about love and partnership and the beautiful life they'd built together. She mentioned their first date, their wedding day, the births of their children. She quoted poetry I didn't recognize. She made people laugh with an anecdote about a vacation they took to Cape Cod. Her voice only broke once, at the very end, when she said, "He was my everything." She didn't mention me once, not once. I was the woman who'd raised him, who'd sat with him through every childhood fever, who'd taught him to tie his shoes and ride a bike and be kind. I was the one who worked double shifts to keep him in Little League, who helped with every homework assignment, who drove him to chess club and debate team and college tours. I was invisible. I should have seen it then. I should have known. But I was drowning in my own grief, barely able to stand upright, and I told myself she was just overwhelmed. That she'd loved him too. That grief makes people selfish. I made excuses for her because the alternative, that she'd erased me on purpose, was too painful to face. At the reception afterward, held in the church basement with limp sandwiches and bitter coffee, people kept asking me if I was okay. Such a stupid question. Was I okay? My son was dead. How could I be okay? But I said what you're supposed to say. I'm managing, taking it day by day. Thank you for coming. The words felt scripted, meaningless, like lines from a play I'd never auditioned for, but somehow got cast in anyway. My daughter-in-law held court in one corner, surrounded by their friends, her friends, really. Young couples with young children, people my son's age, people who had futures. I sat in a folding chair against the wall and watched her accept condolences like a queen receiving tribute. She'd changed into a simpler dress, something more comfortable, while I was still suffocating in my too tight black one. She'd thought ahead. She'd brought a change of clothes. I hadn't thought at all. The first request came 6 weeks after the funeral. She called me on a Sunday morning, right before I was supposed to leave for Sunday service, the only time I leave the house now. Her voice on the phone was soft, apologetic, strained. "I'm so sorry to ask this," she said. "I know you're dealing with your own grief, but I'm drowning here. The kids need supplies for school, and with all the medical bills still coming in, I just don't know how we're going to manage." She said she needed $500. I had maybe $800 in my checking account, already earmarked for property taxes I couldn't quite cover. But they were my grandchildren. Of course I sent it. I went to the bank that afternoon and withdrew the money in cash because she said she needed it immediately. I put it in an envelope and drove it to her house myself. She hugged me at the door, tears in her eyes, and said, "You're a lifesaver. I don't know what we'd do without you." She thanked me, said she loved me, said the kids missed me. I clung to those words. I carried them home like precious stones and held them up to the light, examining them for proof that I still mattered, that I was still part of this family. The second request came a month later. $1,000 for car repairs. Her minivan wouldn't start, and she had to get the kids to school, had to get to work, couldn't afford to miss any more days. Then $1,500 for medical bills. Not my son's medical bills. Those were somehow already handled, but bills for the kids. Dental work, vision care, things insurance didn't fully cover. Then $2,000 for a family trip to help the children heal. Disney World. She showed me the reservation confirmation, the hotel details, the park tickets. The grief counselor said they need something positive to look forward to, she told me. Something to remind them that life can still be good. How could I say no to that? How could I be the one who denied my grieving grandchildren a moment of joy? I was bleeding out financially, watching my small pension and even smaller savings disappear. But I couldn't say no. These were my son's children. This was my son's wife. Saying no felt like abandoning him all over again, like admitting I couldn't do the one thing he would have wanted me to do, take care of his family. Each time I sent money, I'd eat a little less that week, skip a medication refill, and stretch the pills by taking them every other day instead of daily. Keep the heat lower in winter, the air conditioning off in summer. Small sacrifices that added up to a quiet kind of suffering I told myself was noble, maternal, right. Then came the boyfriend. She brought him to dinner 6 months after my son died. 6 months, not even a full year. She called me the day before and asked if she could bring a friend to our usual Sunday dinner. I thought she meant a girlfriend, someone for support. I said yes because I was desperate for company, for connection, for anything that felt like family. She introduced him as Derek, a friend from work. But I saw how he looked at her, how he touched her back when he thought I wasn't watching, how she laughed at his jokes with a lightness I hadn't seen in months. She sat him in my son's chair at my kitchen table, that chair with the wobbly leg that I'd never fixed because my son was going to fix it the next time he visited, except there was no next time. I'd stared at that empty chair for months, unable to sit in it myself, unable to let anyone else sit there. It had become a shrine, untouchable, sacred. And she put a stranger in it like it meant nothing. Like my son's body wasn't even cold yet. Like 6 months was enough time to replace a husband, a father, a life. Derek was pleasant, polite. He complimented my cooking, pot roast. My son's favorite, though of course she hadn't told him that. He asked me about my life, my interests, as if I had any left. He helped clear the dishes. He was objectively a nice man, and I hated him with an intensity that frightened me. I said nothing. What could I say? She was moving on. People move on. That's what everyone kept telling me. You have to move on. Life doesn't stop. He wouldn't want you to be stuck in the past. But I wasn't stuck. I was living in the only place where my son still existed, in memory, in grief, in this duplex where his childhood lived in every wall. I was the one stuck in summer heat and thin walls and the sound of my son's reading glasses still on my nightstand where he left them during his last visit home. 2 weeks before he went into hospice, he'd been reading a biography of Theodore Roosevelt. He never finished it. The bookmark is still on page 247. I couldn't move those glasses. I couldn't touch them. They were all I had left that felt real, that proved he'd existed, that he'd been here in this space, living and breathing and reading about dead presidents. That night, after she and Derek left, I sat at that kitchen table and cried so hard I vomited, just sat there with my head over the trash can and emptied myself out. Grief and rage and betrayal all mixed together until I couldn't tell which was which. The conversation came 3 weeks later. She arrived without calling first, the boyfriend in the passenger seat of her car, the children nowhere in sight. That should have been my first warning. She never went anywhere without those kids. They were her constant excuse, her eternal prop. The children need. The children deserve. Think of the children. She sat across from me at that same table and said she needed to talk about my future. My future, as if I had one, as if anything beyond next week was even conceivable. She'd brought papers, actual printed papers, in a folder, with tabs marking important sections. She'd prepared for this like a business presentation. She said I was getting older, that managing the duplex was too much for me. She gestured around at the slightly peeling wallpaper in the kitchen, the dishes in the sink from breakfast, the general wear of a 72-year-old woman living alone in a house too big for one person, that she worried about me living alone. What if I fell? What if I had a medical emergency? What if something happened and no one found me for days? She showed me brochures, glossy full-color brochures for assisted living facilities nearby, places with names like Sunrise Manor and Golden Years Community and Peaceful Meadows, places with community rooms and activities coordinators and nurses on staff 24 hours a day. She'd highlighted the amenities, fitness rooms, craft classes, movie nights, organized trips to museums and theaters. You could have friends again, she said, her voice warm and encouraging, like she was selling me a vacation package. People your own age. You wouldn't be lonely anymore, and you'd be safe. We'd know you were being taken care of. She said it would be better for everyone. For me, because I'd have care and community. For her, because she wouldn't have to worry about me. For the children, because they needed stability, consistency, a home base that wasn't going to disappear. Then she said what she'd really come to say. She needed the house. She and Derek were ready to start fresh, to build a life, and the duplex was the perfect size. She could raise the children there, in their father's childhood home. Wouldn't that be beautiful? Wouldn't I want that? For my grandchildren to grow up in the same house where their father grew up, to play in the same yard, climb the same trees, make the same memories? It's what he would have wanted, she said, her eyes filling with tears that looked real enough, but somehow weren't. For his children to have his home, for his family to stay connected to his roots. I looked at her and saw a stranger. This woman who'd sat at my table for 15 years, who'd let me babysit her children while she worked, who'd called me mom on holidays and signed cards, "With love from your daughter." Gone. In her place was someone calculating, someone who'd waited just long enough after the funeral to make her move. Someone who'd been planning this for months, maybe longer, maybe since before my son even died. The boyfriend waited in the car. I could see him through the window, scrolling on his phone, sipping a coffee, comfortable and patient. He knew exactly what she was doing in here. This was their plan, their future. And I was just an obstacle to be managed. I said no. It came out harder than I meant it to, sharp enough to cut. My voice sounded like someone else's, someone stronger, angrier, more certain. I said this was my home, mine and my late husband's, the place where I raised my son. I wasn't going anywhere. I wasn't signing anything. I wasn't giving up the only thing I had left. Her face changed. The mask dropped. The concern vanished. What replaced it was cold and hard and ugly. She stood up, knocking her chair back slightly. "You're being selfish," she said, her voice rising. "You're choosing a house, a building, bricks and wood, over your grandchildren's future, over their stability, over their well-being." She told me I was too old to think clearly, that I was making a mistake I'd regret, that grief had clouded my judgment, that she was only thinking of what was best for everyone while I was only thinking of myself. She gathered up her brochures and her folder and walked to the door. Then she turned back and said, "I hope you can live with this decision. I hope you can look at yourself in the mirror and feel good about choosing a house over your own family." She left. The boyfriend drove away without looking at me. I sat at that kitchen table for 3 hours, not moving, not crying, just sitting. Numb. The summer heat pressed down through the windows. My son's chair was empty across from me. And I thought, she planned this, every bit of it. The money requests to drain my savings. The boyfriend to show she was moving on. The timing of this conversation, after I'd given her everything I could when I was most vulnerable. She'd been planning this for months. The next day, a lawyer's letter arrived. Formal, cold, typed on heavy paper with a law firm's letterhead embossed at the top. It outlined a proposal for me to transfer the deed to her in exchange for financial support and occasional visiting rights with my grandchildren. Visiting rights, like I was some dangerous stranger who needed permission to see the children I'd helped raise. The letter detailed a payment plan. She'd cover my rent at an assisted living facility for the first year. After that, I'd be on my own. I could visit the children once a month, on a schedule to be determined mutually, pending good behavior and the children's willingness. Good behavior. Like I was a child myself, like I couldn't be trusted. The letter ended with a deadline. I had 2 weeks to respond. After that, they'd explore other legal options to ensure my safety and the children's welfare. It was a threat dressed up as concern, a weapon wrapped in compassion. I called her. She didn't answer. I called again. 10 times that day, 15 the next. Finally, on the third day, she picked up. Her voice was cool, professional, like she was taking a business call. "I'm glad you're calling. Have you had a chance to review the proposal?" I told her she was insane, that I would never, ever sign over my house, that what she was doing was manipulation, abuse, cruelty. She let me talk, let me rage, let me cry into the phone. Then, in a calm voice, she said, "I'm protecting my family. That's what mothers do. You should understand that." She told me the children were confused by my stubbornness, that they were asking why Grandma didn't love them anymore, why Grandma wouldn't help them, why Grandma was being mean to Mommy. She'd told them I was sick, not physically sick, sick in the head, that Grandma was having trouble thinking clearly, that sometimes old people get confused and angry and they don't mean it, but it's scary for children to be around. She told me to think very carefully about what I was choosing. "You can be part of this family," she said, "or you can be alone in that house until you die, or they take it from you for unpaid taxes. Those are your options. Choose wisely." She hung up before I could respond. I tried calling back. The number was blocked. That was when I understood. This wasn't grief. This wasn't desperation. This was strategy. She'd been planning this since before the funeral flowers wilted, since before my son took his last breath. Maybe longer. Maybe she'd been waiting years for him to die so she could finally get the house she'd always wanted. The thought made me sick, but I couldn't unknow it once it formed. And I was breaking. My savings were almost gone, spent on my son's final medical bills that insurance refused to cover. The experimental treatments that bought him 3 extra months. The hospice care that let him die with dignity instead of in agony. I'd spent everything, cashed out my tiny 401k, taken a loan against the house that I could barely afford, maxed out 2 credit cards. And I'd do it again. I'd do it 1,000 times. But now I had nothing left. My pension barely covered utilities and groceries. Property taxes were due in 2 months, and I didn't have half of what I owed. The house I'd lived in for 40 years, the house my husband and I bought with our wedding money and fixed up room by room, the house that held every memory of my son's childhood, his first steps in that hallway, his height marks on the doorframe, the dent in the wall from when he threw a baseball inside. That house was going into foreclosure. She knew it. She was waiting for me to fall. And then she'd be there, ready to catch me, ready to help me, ready to take everything. The calls from my grandchildren stopped. My daughter-in-law told them Grandma was sick, that she needed space. Translation: Grandma won't give me what I want, so she doesn't get to see you anymore. They were 8 and 10 years old enough to remember me, old enough to miss me, old enough to be damaged by this. She was teaching them that love was conditional, that family was transactional, that people were disposable when they stopped being useful. I started skipping meals. Not because I couldn't afford food, I could, barely, but because I couldn't taste anything anyway. Everything felt like ashes, like I was chewing paper, swallowing dust. I'd heat up leftovers, the macaroni and cheese I used to make for my son, baked golden on top with breadcrumbs and extra sharp cheddar the way he liked it. I'd take one bite and put the fork down. My teal tracksuit hung looser. My face in the mirror looked like a stranger's, hollow cheeks, dark circles, skin that seemed to sag further every day. I stopped answering the phone entirely. Every call felt like an attack waiting to happen. The creditors wanting their money. The lawyer's office with more threats. Sometimes her number would flash on the screen, unblocked temporarily, and I'd just watch it ring. What was there left to say? Sunday service became my only anchor. That small hour in the church I'd attended for 30 years, surrounded by people who knew my name, who'd known my son, who didn't want anything from me except my presence. I'd sit in my usual pew, third row, left side, aisle seat, and pray. I prayed for strength. I prayed for guidance. I prayed for my son to somehow tell me what to do. But the only answer was silence and the slow, suffocating weight of summer heat pressing down on everything. Pastor Green would sometimes catch my eye during the service and give me a small, sad smile. She knew. Everyone knew. In a neighborhood like ours, news travels fast. The pastor's wife came by once with a casserole and an offer to talk. I thanked her for the food and closed the door. I couldn't bear to say it out loud, to admit what was happening, to confess that my son's wife was taking everything from me and I was too weak, too poor, too old to stop her. My godmother had been dead for 4 years by then. 4 years since the last good year I can remember, before my son got sick, before I understood what it meant to lose everything piece by piece. She was a retired schoolteacher who never married, never had children, but who loved me like I was her own. She wasn't really my godmother, not officially, not in the baptismal records, but that's what I called her from the time I was 6 years old. My mother was barely functional, overwhelmed by poverty and depression and too many children she didn't know how to care for. Ruby, my godmother, taught first grade at my elementary school. She noticed me. That sounds simple, but it wasn't. She saw a skinny kid with dirty clothes and sad eyes and free lunch tickets, and instead of looking through me the way most adults did, she looked at me. Really looked. Really saw. She kept me after class to help clean erasers. She gave me books to take home. She invited me to her house on Saturdays to help her garden, and there was always lunch afterward. Sandwiches with the crusts cut off, lemonade, cookies still warm from the oven. She taught me that I mattered, that I was worth someone's time, that I could be more than what I came from. She was there for everything. My high school graduation, front row, carrying flowers, my wedding to my husband James. She wore a lavender dress and cried during the vows. My son's birth, she showed up at the hospital with a blue teddy bear and a promise that she'd always be his Aunt Ruby. And she was. She babysat him, taught him to read before kindergarten the same way she'd taught me, took him to museums and libraries and anywhere else his curious mind wanted to go. When she died 4 years ago, I cried harder than I'd cried for my own mother. The funeral was small. She'd outlived most of her friends, but beautiful. I gave the eulogy because no one else could. I talked about what she'd given me: dignity, education, love without conditions. I said she'd saved my life in all the ways that mattered. She left me a small check then, $5,000, enough to help with her funeral costs and a little left over. When my son died, that leftover money covered part of his funeral. I thought that was her final gift. I thought she'd already given me everything she had. I was wrong, but I didn't know that yet. In that moment, I was just a woman drowning in summer heat and thin walls, and the weight of betrayal so complete it felt like drowning. I'd sit in my parked car in the driveway every evening, not ready to go inside, not ready to face another night alone in that duplex that was about to stop being mine. The car was a liminal space, a nowhere place where I could exist without having to be anything or do anything or face anything. I'd sit there and stare at nothing and wonder how I'd gotten here, how I'd gone from being a mother and grandmother to being an obstacle, how my son's death had turned me into prey, how the people who were supposed to love me had become the ones trying to destroy me. I want you to understand something. I wasn't a weak woman. I'd raised a son alone after my husband James died of a heart attack when our boy was 12. I'd worked 2 jobs to keep the house, receptionist during the day, cleaning offices at night. I'd survived breast cancer myself 20 years ago, before it came back in my son and took him instead. I'd survived abusive parents, poverty, discrimination, every damn thing this world throws at women like me. But this betrayal dressed up as family, this cruelty wrapped in concern, this was breaking me in ways I didn't know I could break. My daughter-in-law started bringing her boyfriend to my church. They'd sit 3 rows behind me, close enough for me to feel their presence, far enough to pretend it was coincidence. The first time it happened, I thought I was imagining things. But then I heard her laugh, that particular laugh she had, high and performative, and I knew. After service, she'd approach me with the children, let them hug me while she stood back, watching. The kids would wrap their arms around me, and I'd breathe in the smell of their shampoo, their laundry detergent, trying to memorize it, trying to hold on to something. Then she'd check her watch and say, "Okay, kids, time to go. Grandma needs her rest." And she'd take them away before I could say more than hello. It was torture disguised as mercy. Look what you're missing. Look what you could have if you'd just cooperate. Look what you're throwing away for a house. The lawyer letters kept coming. Every few days, a new one. Now, they suggested I was mentally unfit to manage my own affairs. They implied I was a danger to myself. They used words like cognitive decline and diminished capacity. They cited my age, my isolation, my concerning weight loss and self-neglect. One letter suggested my refusal to accept help was evidence of paranoid thinking and impaired judgment. I was 72 years old with a mind sharper than most people half my age. But age is a weapon when someone wants to take from you. Being old means being vulnerable. Being old means people can suggest you don't know what's best for yourself, and other people will nod along, will agree that maybe she does need help. Maybe she can't handle things anymore. Maybe someone should step in. I stopped answering the phone. I stopped answering the door. I lived in my tracksuit and my silence, eating macaroni and cheese that tasted like nothing, staring at my son's reading glasses on the nightstand, waiting for the foreclosure notice that would end this slow death. Then something happened. Something small, insignificant, really. But sometimes, it's the small things that save you. I needed tax documents for the foreclosure proceedings. The city had sent a final notice. I had 30 days to pay what I owed, or they'd begin the process of taking the house. My lawyer, a free legal aid attorney who looked about 25 and seemed perpetually exhausted, told me I needed to gather every piece of financial documentation I could find. Proof of income, proof of expenses, proof that I'd paid what I could when I could. I'd been avoiding my son's old desk, the one in the corner of the duplex where he used to do homework as a teenager. The wooden desk I'd found at a yard sale and refinished myself, sanding it smooth and painting it navy blue because that was his favorite color. It still had his things in it: pens, old birthday cards, expired coupons, a tangle of old phone chargers, all the debris of a life interrupted. I couldn't face it. Opening that desk meant confronting the fact that he'd never open it again, that all these objects had outlived their owner. But I didn't have a choice anymore. I needed those documents. I needed to fight, even if I was pretty sure I'd already lost. I opened the drawer on a Tuesday afternoon, summer heat making everything slow and thick. The drawer stuck a little. It always had, needed oil that neither of us had ever bothered with. Inside was chaos. Papers jumbled together with no organization. Electric bills from 3 years ago. Birthday cards I'd sent him that he'd kept. A photo of the two of us at his college graduation, both of us grinning, both of us believing the future would be kind. I dug deeper, looking for anything official, anything with dates and numbers. And then, beneath old papers and dust, stuffed in a shoebox that also contained old tax returns and receipts for medical bills, I found it, an insurance policy with a letterhead from an estate lawyer in Toronto. But the name on it wasn't my son's. It was mine. My hands shook as I read it. an inheritance from a relative I'd never met, held in escrow. My godmother's second cousin, a woman named Margaret, who'd emigrated to Canada in the 1960s and built a quiet fortune in real estate. Instructions that the inheritance should pass to my godmother's chosen heir upon Margaret's death. Margaret died 2 years ago, the same year as my son. The paperwork showed she'd passed away 3 months before he did, and my godmother had chosen me, had listed me decades ago as her heir, had told this cousin in Canada, if anything happens to me, give everything to my girl, take care of her. I read it 3 times. 4. The words kept rearranging themselves in my head, refusing to make sense. I called the number on the letterhead, expecting it to be disconnected, expecting this to be a mistake or a scam or a hallucination brought on by stress and hunger and grief. My hands shook so badly I had to dial twice. A woman answered on the 3rd ring. Professional, kind, Canadian accent, polite and warm. Thompson and Associates, this is Claire speaking. I said I'd found some paperwork, that I didn't understand it, that I needed to know if this was real. She asked for my name. I gave it. She asked me to hold. I sat there listening to soft jazz hold music for what felt like hours, but was probably 2 minutes. Then she came back on, and her voice had changed, warmer now, excited. Mrs. Peterson, we've been trying to reach you for 2 years. She asked for my information, verified my identity, my date of birth, my mother's maiden name, my relationship to Ruby Henderson. She asked me gentle, careful questions while I sat at my son's desk crying so hard I could barely speak. She told me I needed to come to New York to complete the paperwork, that the inheritance had been waiting for me for 2 years, that they'd sent notices to my address. I told her I'd never seen them. Too much mail, too much grief, too much noise. Everything from that time was a blur. Bills and condolence cards and medical statements all mixed together in boxes I'd been too broken to sort through. She was patient. She explained that the estate had been in probate for a while, that there'd been some complications with Canadian and U.S. tax law, but everything was settled now. The money was mine. I just needed to sign some papers. I asked how much. She hesitated, said she couldn't give exact numbers over the phone, but that I should plan on spending a few hours at their New York office to review everything. That I might want to bring a lawyer, that it was significant. I didn't have a lawyer. I didn't have money for a lawyer. I told her I'd come alone. She said that was fine. We scheduled an appointment for Friday morning. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed staring at my son's reading glasses, thinking about my godmother, about this woman Margaret I'd never met, about being loved and protected by people who existed only in memory and paperwork. I thought about the money, not how much they wouldn't say over the phone, but what it meant. It meant I'd been wrong. I wasn't alone. I wasn't abandoned. I'd been watched over even in my darkest moment. Ruby had done this. Somehow, decades ago, she'd put protections in place. She'd made sure that if anything happened to her, I'd be taken care of. She'd loved me that much, had thought about my future, my security, my survival, had made sure I wouldn't be left with nothing. I cried, but it was different this time. Not the hollow, empty crying I'd been doing for months. This was something else. Relief, maybe, or hope, or just the overwhelming sense that maybe, just maybe, I wasn't going to lose everything after all. The bank appointment was on a Friday morning. I drove to downtown Brooklyn in my teal tracksuit because I didn't care anymore what I looked like. What did it matter? I was meeting with strangers who'd tell me there'd been a mistake, that the inheritance was $100 or already claimed or never real to begin with. I didn't let myself hope for more. Hope hurt too much. The building was sleek and modern, all glass and steel. I felt out of place immediately. This old woman in a tracksuit surrounded by people in business suits, carrying briefcases and looking important. The receptionist gave me a visitor's badge and directed me to the 4th floor. The elevator was mirrored, and I avoided looking at myself. 3 officials met me in a private room: the manager with the silver hair and tie clip, Jennifer, the young woman with kind eyes, and another man, middle-aged, with glasses and a gentle voice, who introduced himself as the estate attorney handling Margaret's accounts. They were serious, formal, asking me to verify my address, my date of birth, my mother's maiden name. Standard security questions, but each one felt loaded. Each answer felt like I was confessing to something. Yes, I still live there. Yes, that's my birthday. Yes, my mother's name was Patricia. Yes, she's dead. Yes, I know. I answered automatically, waiting for the bad news, waiting for them to say there'd been a mistake, that someone else had already claimed it, that I was too late, that I'd misunderstood. Then Jennifer, the youngest one, slid a folder across the table. She opened it carefully, like it contained something precious. She pointed to a number, $95,000. I didn't react. I couldn't. The number was too big, too impossible. Numbers like that didn't happen to people like me. That was house money, college tuition money, retirement money. That was the kind of money that changed lives. She said it again, slower this time, like maybe I hadn't heard. $95,000 from Margaret Henderson's estate, held in escrow for 2 years, now released to you as the designated heir of Ruby Henderson. She continued, her voice gentle, plus interest accumulated during probate, minus administrative fees and legal costs. Net amount to be transferred to you, $95,000. I put my head down on that desk and sobbed, the kind of crying that empties you out, that leaves you hollow and clean, the kind that shakes your whole body, that makes your chest ache, that feels like something breaking open inside you. The officials didn't try to stop me. They let me cry until I couldn't cry anymore, until I was just breathing, just existing in a room where someone had loved me enough to protect me from beyond the grave. Jennifer handed me tissues. The attorney got me more water. The manager just sat quietly, his hands folded, giving me space. When I could finally breathe again, when I could finally look up, Jennifer explained the details slowly, carefully. The money was in a trust account, clean and clear, no strings attached. I could access it immediately. She gave me paperwork to sign, so many papers, each one requiring my signature, my initials, my acknowledgement. Account numbers to memorize, tax forms to complete, a cashier's check for $5,000 to hold me over until the main transfer cleared in 3 to 5 business days. I held that check in my shaking hands. $5,000. More money than I'd seen in one place in years. And it was just the advance, just a fraction. The real money would come next week. Jennifer said, "Mrs. Peterson, I want you to understand. This money is yours. There are no conditions. No one can take it from you. It's protected under the terms of the trust. You're safe now." Safe. I'd forgotten what that word meant. Before I left, they gave me one more thing. A sealed envelope with my name on it, in my godmother's handwriting. That distinctive cursive she'd used to write comments on my homework when I was 6 years old. Careful letters, each one formed with precision. They'd been instructed to hold it until I claimed the inheritance. They didn't know what was inside. Neither did I. But I knew it was from her, from Ruby, my godmother, my savior, the woman who'd seen me when no one else did. I drove home in a daze. I didn't trust myself to read the letter while driving, didn't trust myself to see it through tears. I parked in my driveway and sat there, the envelope in my lap, the summer heat pressing down, my heart hammering so hard I thought it might break through my chest. The envelope was thick, good paper, heavy, the kind of envelope that holds important things. My name was written across the front in blue ink. Underneath, in smaller letters, "To be opened when you receive your inheritance. With all my love, Aunt Ruby." I should have waited, gone inside, found somewhere private and quiet. But I couldn't wait. I'd been waiting my whole life for someone to tell me I mattered. I'd been drowning for 2 years, and this letter felt like air. I opened the envelope. Inside was a single page, handwritten, dated 3 months before my godmother died. 4 years ago, before my son got sick, before I knew I'd need this, before everything fell apart. The letter said, "My dearest girl, if you're reading this, then Margaret is gone and you're receiving what we set aside for you. I know you're probably confused. I know you're probably thinking you don't deserve this. Stop. You deserve everything good in this world. You deserve protection and peace and a future without fear." Margaret and I never met in person. We were pen pals for 40 years, can you imagine? We wrote letters every month, sharing our lives across borders and decades. I told her about you. I told her you were the daughter I chose, the one who made my life worth living. I told her about the sad little girl who walked into my classroom and how I fell in love with her immediately. How you grew into a woman I was so proud of, how you gave me purpose. When she told me about her estate plans, when she asked if there was anyone in my life who should be remembered, I asked her to include you. She said yes without hesitation. That's what love does. It protects beyond death. It reaches forward into the dark times and says, "I'm still here. You're not alone. Use this money however you need to. Fix what's broken. Build what's new. Take care of yourself the way you took care of everyone else. I know you, my sweet girl. I know you probably spent your last dime on someone else. I know you probably sacrificed yourself trying to save everyone around you. Stop. You matter too. You matter most. You gave me joy. You gave me purpose. This is my joy and purpose now, knowing you'll be okay. I loved you from the moment your mother brought you to my classroom, this serious little girl with sad eyes who needed someone to see her. I saw you. I see you still. You're going to be okay. Sweetheart, you're going to be more than okay. All my love forever, Aunt Ruby. I read it once, twice, 10 times. I spoke out loud to her, to my godmother, to the empty car and the summer heat and the duplex I was about to save. I said, "Thank you." I said, "I miss you." I said, "I didn't know I needed this until right now." I said, "You saved me. You saved me. You saved me." I looked at my son's reading glasses on the passenger seat. I'd grabbed them on my way out that morning, unable to leave them behind, and I said, "Your grandmother saved me, baby. She's still saving me. She's still here." That night, I made macaroni and cheese baked golden on top. I made a full pan, the way I used to when my son was alive. I used extra cheese. I added breadcrumbs. I baked it until the top was crispy and perfect. I ate 2 helpings. I tasted every bite, the salt, the butter, the sharpness of the cheddar. I tasted it all. I was alive. I was going to survive. I was going to be okay. The next morning, I called a lawyer. My own lawyer, not one chosen by fear or desperation. Not a legal aid attorney with 100 other cases. A real lawyer who specialized in elder law and estate planning. Her name was Patricia Chen, and her rates were expensive, but I didn't care. I could afford it now. I could afford to protect myself. I told her everything. The inheritance, the harassment, the threats, the lawyer letters claiming I was mentally unfit, the manipulation, the isolation from my grandchildren, the boyfriend in my son's chair, everything. She listened without interrupting, took notes, asked clarifying questions. At the end, she said 3 words that made me cry again. "We're going to fix this. First, we paid the property taxes. All of them, plus the penalties, plus 6 months in advance. Patricia made the payment herself, sent me the receipt, made it official. The foreclosure proceedings stopped immediately. The house was safe. My home was safe. Second, we sent a formal letter to my daughter-in-law's lawyer. Patricia drafted it, and it was beautiful, professional but sharp, factual but devastating. It outlined harassment, undue influence, elder financial abuse. It stated clearly that I was mentally competent, financially secure, and no longer vulnerable to manipulation. It warned that any further contact of a threatening nature would result in legal action, including possible criminal charges for elder abuse. It cited specific laws, specific statutes, specific penalties. It was 5 pages long and every word was a shield. Third, we started exploring my options. Patricia said I didn't have to stay in the duplex if I didn't want to. That sometimes a fresh start was healing. We looked at properties, small houses in quieter neighborhoods, places where I could breathe, where the memories wouldn't suffocate me, where I could build something new. My daughter-in-law called 2 days after the lawyer letters went out. I didn't answer. She called again, left a voicemail. Her voice was different, smaller, uncertain, almost childlike. She said she was sorry, that she'd been stressed, that she'd been grieving too, that she hadn't meant for things to get so ugly, that she missed me, that the children missed me, that maybe we could all get together, talk things through, be a family again. I made mistakes, she said on the voicemail. I was wrong about some things, but we're family. That has to count for something. Please call me back, please. I listened to the voicemail twice, then I deleted it. She showed up at my door the following Sunday, the children in tow. They looked older, taller. The 8-year-old was almost 10 now. The 10-year-old was nearly 12. 2 years of their lives I'd missed. 2 years she'd stolen from me. 2 years of birthdays and school plays and lost teeth and all the small moments that make up a childhood. She knocked, called my name through the door, said she just wanted to talk, said she'd been wrong, that she'd been grieving too, that we all needed each other. The children were crying. I could hear them asking why Grandma wouldn't open the door, asking what they'd done wrong. I wanted to open that door. God, I wanted to. My hand was on the knob. I could hear my grandson's voice, higher than I remembered, asking his mother why Grandma didn't love them anymore. My heart broke all over again. But I looked at my godmother's letter, still on my kitchen table, where I read it every morning. I heard her voice in my head. Protect yourself. You deserve peace. I spoke through the door, loud enough for them to hear. You made your choice when you tried to take my home. You made your choice when you used my grandchildren as weapons. You made your choice when you told them I was sick in the head. You don't get to unmake it now that I'm not convenient to manipulate anymore. She said, I made a mistake. People make mistakes. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I said, mistakes are accidents. What you did was strategy. You planned it. You executed it. There's a difference. She was quiet for a moment. Then she asked about the money. She didn't say it directly, but I heard it anyway. In the pause. In the careful way she asked, are you doing okay financially? Are you going to help us? Are you going to share? Now that you have money, now that you're not drowning, are you going to save us too? I said, no. This inheritance is from people who loved me without conditions. You taught me what conditional love looks like. I don't want any part of it. She said, you're really going to do this? You're really going to cut us off? Your own grandchildren? I said, you cut them off from me. You used them as leverage. You told them I was crazy. You destroyed our relationship on purpose. I'm just refusing to let you destroy anything else. She left. The children were still crying. I sat on my couch and cried too, because loving them didn't mean sacrificing myself to their mother's greed. Love without boundaries isn't love. It's surrender. And I'd surrendered enough. 3 weeks later, I put the duplex on the market. Patricia helped me find a realtor who was honest and kind. The house sold fast. Good neighborhood, good bones, good price. I sold it for a fair price to a young couple with a baby. They reminded me of myself 40 years ago, hopeful, scared, determined. They walked through with wide eyes, talking about their plans, painting the nursery, fixing up the backyard, building a life. I gave them a good deal. They needed it, and I needed them to love this house the way I once had, before it became a prison of grief. I bought a small house 2 hours north, in the country near a town I'd visited once as a child. It had land, space, quiet, no shared driveways, no thin walls, no neighbors who knew my story or my son or anything about the woman I used to be. Just trees and clean air and a front porch where I could sit in the mornings and drink coffee without feeling watched. The house was small, 2 bedrooms, 1 bathroom, kitchen and living room combined. But it was mine, truly mine, paid for in full with part of the inheritance. No mortgage, no landlord, no one who could take it from me. I joined a new church, small, friendly. Sunday service in a country chapel where no one knew I'd lost a son, where I was just another woman seeking peace. I prayed differently there. I prayed with gratitude instead of desperation. I thanked God for Ruby, for Margaret, for unlikely protection and unexpected salvation. I started gardening. I'd never had space for a real garden before, just a few pots on my duplex stoop where I'd grow tomatoes that never quite ripened and herbs that always seemed to die. Now I had room, actual land, soil that hadn't been walked on by 100 feet. I planted tomatoes, zucchini, flowers I didn't know the names of. I spent hours with my hands in the dirt, talking to my son, talking to my godmother, talking to myself. The soil was therapy. The growing things were proof I could still nurture something, that I wasn't just a woman of death and loss. I could grow things. I could help things live. My daughter-in-law tried to sue. Of course she did. She claimed I'd been coerced into selling the duplex, that I'd been taken advantage of in a vulnerable state, that she deserved part of the proceeds as my son's widow, that the house had been his childhood home and therefore should pass to his children. Her lawyer sent threatening letters. Patricia sent one letter back, calm and devastating. It outlined the timeline of her harassment, the documented evidence of elder abuse, the clear paper trail of her manipulation. It included copies of every threatening letter she'd sent, every voicemail, every witness statement from neighbors who'd seen her bring her boyfriend to my church, who'd seen her show up at my door with the crying children as props. That was the end of it. She had no case. She had nothing but audacity. Her lawyer dropped her. She couldn't find another one willing to take the case. It was over. I heard through mutual acquaintances, church friends who still had connections to the old neighborhood, that she and her boyfriend broke up, that she'd moved to a cheaper apartment, that she was struggling, that she'd tried to reach out to other family members for money and they'd all said no, because by then everyone knew what she'd done. I felt nothing, not satisfaction, not vindication, nothing. Her struggles weren't my responsibility anymore. I'd spent 2 years drowning to keep her afloat. She was on her own now. The inheritance changed everything, but not the way you might think. Yes, it saved my house. Yes, it gave me options. Yes, it bought me freedom and peace and a future. But the real gift was the letter, the words, the proof that I'd been loved beyond measure by people who owed me nothing and gave me everything. Every December now, I honor my godmother's memory by giving Christmas gifts to children in foster care because she was one. She'd told me once about growing up in the system, about how Christmas was the hardest time because all the other kids got visits from family and she got nothing. About how one year a teacher gave her a book and how she'd kept that book until it literally fell apart from being read so many times. I buy books and warm coats and small things that make a child feel seen, art supplies, board games, fuzzy socks, things that say, someone thought about you specifically, someone cared. I spend about $5,000 a year. It's what she would have done. It's what she did for me, over and over, in small ways that added up to a lifetime of being seen. I've been in my country house for 6 months now. The seasons changed from summer to fall to winter. The heat that used to suffocate me is gone. The air is clean and cold and sharp. Snow covers everything in white, and it feels like a fresh start, like the world is being rewritten. I walk every morning again, my knees finally strong enough, helped by the physical therapy I can now afford. My teal tracksuit has been replaced with newer clothes that fit my thinner frame. I'll probably never gain back all the weight I lost, but I'm eating again, tasting again, living again. I feel like myself, not the self I was before my son died. I'll never be that woman again, but a new self, built from the bones of loss and the gift of being loved. My son's reading glasses are still with me. They sit on my nightstand in the new house, but they don't haunt me anymore. They comfort me. I touch them sometimes and say good morning. I tell him about my day. I tell him his grandmother saved me. I tell him I'm okay now. I tell him I hope he's proud of me. I tell him I love him still. I always will. I wish I could tell you I've reconciled with my daughter-in-law, that my grandchildren and I have rebuilt our relationship. I can't. She poisoned that well too deeply. Maybe someday when they're adults, they'll reach out on their own. Maybe they'll ask me for my side of the story. Maybe they'll understand that protecting yourself isn't the same as abandonment. Maybe they won't. I've made peace with both possibilities. What I need people to understand, what I need you to understand, is that elder abuse isn't always obvious. It doesn't always look like physical violence or screaming matches. Sometimes it looks like concern, like care, like family just trying to help an aging relative who can't help herself. Manipulators use specific tactics, and they're devastatingly effective. Isolation. They cut you off from support systems, from friends, from anyone who might see through them. They make you feel like they're the only ones who care, the only ones who understand. Guilt. They make you feel responsible for their problems, their stress, their futures. They remind you constantly of what you owe them, what you should do for them. Urgency. They create artificial crises to pressure you into fast decisions. Everything is always an emergency that requires immediate action, immediate money, immediate compliance. Financial pressure. They exploit your vulnerabilities, your debts, your fears of losing what little you have left. They wait until you're at your weakest, your most desperate, and then they strike. Replacement of affection. They withdraw love, access to grandchildren, family connection, and dangle it like a carrot in front of a starving horse. They teach you that love is something you have to earn by giving them what they want. These aren't accidents. These are strategies, and they work. American research indicates that over 5 million seniors are abused every year, most often by their own family members. The people who are supposed to protect them are the ones exploiting them. In Mexico, studies indicate that 1 in 3 seniors suffers some form of mistreatment. This is an epidemic hidden behind closed doors, behind family loyalty, behind shame. If you're listening to this and recognizing your own story, here's what I want you to know. You're not being selfish for protecting yourself. You're not being ungrateful for refusing to be used. You're not abandoning family by setting boundaries. Love that requires your complete surrender isn't love. It's exploitation. Get help. Call Adult Protective Services in your area. Find a lawyer who specializes in elder law. Many offer free consultations, and some work on sliding scales. Document everything, every text, every call, every threat. Save voicemails, screenshot messages. Write down dates and times and what was said. Build your case because you'll probably need it. Tell someone you trust what's happening. Don't suffer in silence because you're afraid of looking difficult or ungrateful or crazy. Abusers rely on your silence. They rely on your shame. They rely on your fear that no one will believe you. Break that silence. Your dignity matters. Your safety matters. You matter. And if you're someone who loves an elderly person who's being manipulated, speak up. Don't assume they know what's happening. Don't assume they'll ask for help. Abusers are skilled at making victims doubt their own reality. Be the person who says, I see what's happening. You're not alone. Let me help. My godmother gave me 2 gifts. The first was the inheritance, $95,000 that bought me freedom. The second was the letter, proof that I was worth protecting, worth loving, worth saving. The money will run out eventually. I'll spend it carefully, stretch it as far as I can, but it's not infinite. The letter, though. The letter is forever. Those words live in me now. They're the voice I hear when I doubt myself. They're the proof I hold up when grief tries to convince me I'm alone. I've been thinking about legacy lately, what we leave behind when we're gone. My son left me memories, beautiful ones, painful ones, complicated ones. Memories of a boy who loved deeply and lived fully for the time he had. My godmother left me protection and love and a letter that says, "You're not alone, you never were." What will I leave? I don't have children to pass this house to. I don't have grandchildren who'll remember me, who'll inherit these belongings and tell stories about their grandmother. But I have the foster children who receive gifts every December, who might remember for a moment that someone saw them. I have the young couple who bought my duplex, who'll raise their family there, who'll fill those rooms with better memories than mine. I have myself, healing slowly, building a life that feels like mine again. My son died 2 years ago. His wife tried to take everything I had left. And my godmother, dead for 4 years, reached forward through time and paperwork and one stranger's kindness to save me. That's the story. That's the miracle. That's what I want you to remember. Love doesn't end at death. Protection doesn't end at the grave. The people who truly saw us, who truly loved us, they stay. They stay in the choices they made, in the care they took, in the plans they set in motion. They stay in letters that wait patiently to be read at exactly the right moment. They stay in gardens and fresh starts and the courage to say no to people who treat love like a transaction. My godmother is gone. My son is gone. But I'm still here, still standing, still breathing, still whole. Because of them. Because love reaches forward. Because I was protected even when I thought I was abandoned. I don't know where you're listening from right now. I don't know if you're sitting in a car in a driveway, not ready to go inside. I don't know if you're fighting your own battle with people who should love you, but are using you instead. But I want you to know this. You're not alone, even when it feels like you are. Even when everyone you trusted has turned their backs. Somewhere, someone loved you enough to protect you. Hold on to that. Fight for that. You're worth it. If this story resonated with you, if you've been through something similar or know someone who has, leave a comment. Tell me where you're listening from. Tell me what you would have done in my position. And if you found value in this, if it helped you see something clearly or feel less alone, hit that like button and subscribe. These stories matter. Your story matters. We survive by sharing them. Thank you for listening. Thank you for being here. And remember, you're worth protecting. Always.